Story 1. My parents forced me to give up my internship to my golden sister. But I fought back silently, made a brave decision, and reclaimed it as my own. Hey Reddit, here is my family mess. Which honestly seems straight out of a soap opera. I am Emily, 19F. And I am in that weird limbo after graduating high school and before starting college. I was beyond excited because I recently got accepted for a summer internship in New York. Something I had been planning and dreaming about for years. All of this was achieved thanks to my own effort. Filling out applications, writing essays, and crossing my fingers. It was an opportunity at a small but prestigious graphic design firm. Just what I needed to boost my future career. When I received the acceptance letter, my excitement was palpable. My parents, although initially seeming happy for me, quickly started acting strange, especially my mom. A few days later, she started with comments like, "Your sister, Chloe, could benefit much more from an experience like this. And, you have your whole life ahead of you. But for Chloe, this is more important now." Here, I should clarify that Chloe, 22F, is what many call the golden child. She is more charismatic, more popular, and has always been my parents' favorite. Do not get me wrong, I do not hate my sister. But she and I live in completely different worlds. She is not particularly passionate about anything and basically floats through life waiting for something interesting to happen. Meanwhile, I am the type who plans everything, organizes, and fights for every small achievement. So, when my parents told me that I should give the internship to Chloe, I almost fell out of my chair. How could she keep something she had not even applied for? When I tried to argue, my mom came up with the classic, "You are young, you can find something else. Chloe needs this more than you." The following days were a hell of emotional manipulation. My parents reminded me of every little sacrifice they made for me while I was growing up, and somehow used that as proof that I now owed them these small concessions. My dad, who usually does not get so involved in these matters, even said, "We are not going to waste this opportunity when Chloe could benefit more from this." That phrase left me frozen. Waste? My hard work was a waste to them? I tried to talk to Chloe, thinking that maybe she would understand and could convince them to leave me alone. But instead of supporting me, she shrugged and said something like, "If they want me to go, I guess I can do it. New York sounds fun." Her lack of enthusiasm angered me even more because, while I saw this internship as a giant step towards my future, for her it was just another free trip paid for by life. Finally, exhausted from the constant fights, I gave in to the internship. Not because I wanted to, but because I felt I had no other choice. My mom literally took my acceptance letter and wrote an email to the coordinator saying that Chloe would be the one attending. I stayed in my room, completely devastated, wondering if I would ever matter enough for my parents to support me. The problem was that, although my mom believed that her email solved everything, it was not that simple. The program required in-person interviews before confirming any participation, and the deadline was only a few days away. This gave me an idea. What if I showed up anyway? I did not have much to lose. My mom and Chloe assumed everything was under control, so no one would pay attention if I disappeared for a while. Here comes the crazy part. I took a Greyhound bus from our small town in Ohio to New York. It was almost 10 hours of overnight travel in an uncomfortable seat next to a man who snored like a truck. When I arrived, I was exhausted but determined. I had my portfolio in a backpack and a half-wrinkled dress that I had hastily packed. I could not let all this be in vain. I arrived just in time for the interview. And it was surreal. The office was in an old building in the heart of Manhattan, with large windows overlooking the bustle of the city. I sat in front of a panel of 3 people and gave them my all. I told them about my passion for design, my goals, and how I had dreamed of this opportunity for so long. I tried to ignore the fear that they would discover the family mess behind my application. When I left the interview, I felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. I had no idea if I had impressed the interviewers or if all of this had been a pointless madness. I decided to stay in the city for a few more hours before taking the bus back. I walked through Times Square, looked at the lights, and wondered if I would ever belong in a place like this. What I did not know was that my little escapade was about to blow up in my face in a way I never imagined. After that intense interview and my surreal walk through Manhattan, I returned home on the same Greyhound bus, exhausted but somehow satisfied. For a moment, everything seemed to be under control. However, as you can imagine, that tranquility did not last long. When I arrived home, everything seemed normal. My mom was busy with her cell phone, my dad watching sports on TV, and my sister, Chloe, flipping through a fashion magazine as if she were about to appear on the cover. My heart beat faster every second because I knew that sooner or later they would discover that something was not right. But I did not expect it to happen so fast. 2 days later, while I was in my room pretending to study for an online course that my parents insisted I take. I received an email from the internship company. My heart skipped a beat when I read the subject: "Congratulations. You have been selected." I could not believe it. I had managed to overcome all the obstacles, my parents' manipulations, and even Chloe's coldness. And finally, I had achieved something that was truly mine. My first instinct was to jump for joy. But I quickly remembered that I could not show it. If my parents found out, there would be a storm. So, I did the most logical thing. I put my phone away, took a deep breath, and left my room as if nothing had happened. However, keeping the secret was harder than I thought. On the one hand, I was full of pride for having achieved it. On the other, every time I saw Chloe talking to her best friend about how excited she was for her supposed upcoming internship, I felt like I was going to explode. How could she be so calm knowing that she had done nothing to earn it? The bomb exploded the next day. I was in the kitchen when my mom received a call from the program coordinator. I did not know that they were going to contact Chloe to confirm her attendance. But it seems they did. I heard my mom answer the phone in her usual sweet tone. But soon her face changed. "What do you mean she is not registered?" she said, raising her voice. Of course, I sent an email confirming that Chloe would go instead of Emily. My ears perked up. This was bad, very bad. I ran upstairs before my mom could connect the dots. Apparently, the coordinator explained that the internship had been awarded to me, not Chloe, because I was the one who showed up for the interview. My mom tried to explain the confusion, but obviously, there was not much she could do at that point. A few minutes later, my bedroom door burst open. My mom was furious. "What did you do?" she yelled, as if she had just found out I had robbed a bank. "I went to the interview," I replied calmly, although I was shaking inside. It was my opportunity, not Chloe's. That was enough to light the fuse. My parents started yelling in unison, saying that I had betrayed the family, disobeyed their authority, and been selfish by not thinking about what this meant for Chloe. The most surreal thing was that Chloe did not say anything. She just stood there with her arms crossed, as if she were a spectator instead of the protagonist of all this drama. Finally, after a discussion that seemed to last for hours, my mom made her grand declaration: "You are not going to that internship, Emily. If it is not for Chloe, it will not be for anyone." But what my mom did not know was that I had already replied to the company's email, confirming my participation, and there was no way I was giving up that opportunity. When my mom made that threat, I felt as if all the air had escaped from the room. My opportunity was in danger again. But this time, I was not going to let anyone take it away from me. I had worked too hard and endured too much contempt to give up. I stood up, took a deep breath, and for the first time in a long time, I decided not to be silent. "Mom, you have no right to tell me what to do with something I earned on my own. You cannot decide for me. This internship is mine, not Chloe's, and I am going." It did not go as I expected. My dad, who until then had been silent, rose from his chair. "How dare you talk to your mother like that?" he roared. "After everything we have done for you, this is how you repay us? Disobeying our decisions and causing problems in the family?" "Problems in the family?" I replied, my voice trembling between rage and sadness. "You have ignored me my whole life. It is always about Chloe. I fought for this opportunity, and all you want is to take it away from me to give it to her. It is not fair." My mom looked at me as if I had lost my mind. "This is not about favoritism, Emily. It is about what is best for the family. Chloe is more sociable, more capable of making a good impression. You are simply not ready for something this big." Those words pierced me like a knife. For years, I had tried to be enough for them. But at that moment, I understood that I never would be. My parents were not going to change no matter what I did. The argument continued for hours. My parents insisted that I should cancel my confirmation and give up my spot, while I repeated that I was not going to do it. Chloe, for her part, continued her role as spectator, although from time to time she would throw in sarcastic comments like, "I do not know why you are bothering so much, Emily. It is just an internship." Finally, my mom played her last card: "If you decide to go, do not expect any support from this family. You are making a selfish decision, and we are not going to back you up." "Perfect," I replied, with a determination that even I did not know I had. "You have never really backed me up, so I do not see what difference it makes." That night, I locked myself in my room and cried. Not because I doubted my decision, but because it hurt to see how little they cared about what I felt. My parents were willing to cut ties with me rather than acknowledge that I had a right to my own achievements. But I was not going to let that stop me. I knew I had to prepare for what was coming. My mom would probably try to contact the company to do something behind my back. So I sent them an email explaining the situation. I told them briefly but honestly that there were family conflicts and that someone might try to interfere with my participation. I asked that any changes or communication go exclusively through me. To my surprise, I received an almost immediate response. The coordinator was incredibly understanding and assured me that my place was secure. She also mentioned that if anyone else tried to impersonate me, she would report it immediately. The next few days were hell. My parents refused to talk to me directly, but their actions spoke volumes. They canceled my allowance, deactivated my debit card, and even blocked my access to the family car. It seemed they were doing everything possible to sabotage me, but they did not understand that I was ready to fight to the end. A breaking point came when I discovered that my mom had tried to send another email to the company. Fortunately, they were no longer using my information as a reference. When she did not receive a response, she exploded with fury, accusing me of ruining everything by not following the family rules. In the midst of all this chaos, something unexpected happened. Chloe finally talked to me. One night, while I was packing my things for the trip, she came into my room. "Are you really going to do this?" she asked, in a more serious tone than I was used to hearing from her. "Yes," I replied without looking at her. "I cannot stay here allowing everyone to walk all over me." "And are you willing to lose mom and dad for this?" she asked. Although her tone was not as challenging as I expected, it almost sounded curious. I looked directly at her. For the first time in days, I said, "Chloe, I lost them a long time ago. I am just realizing it now." She did not answer but nodded slowly and left the room without saying more. I do not know if it was a gesture of understanding or resignation, but for the first time, I felt that maybe I was not so alone. Finally, the day of departure arrived. My parents did not bother to say goodbye, but that did not surprise me. With my backpack on my shoulder and my ticket in hand, I boarded the bus that would take me to the beginning of a new stage in my life. I knew the road would not be easy, but I was ready to face anything. The journey to my new life was full of mixed thoughts. As the bus moved along the highways, leaving behind the small town where I had spent my whole life, I felt excited and scared at the same time. I had made a decision that separated me from my family, but I also knew it was the only thing I could do to be true to myself. When I arrived in the city to start my internship, reality hit me hard. There was no one waiting for me, no familiar face to welcome me. But for the first time, that loneliness did not feel like a punishment but like an opportunity. It was my chance to start from scratch, without the expectations and manipulations of my parents on my shoulders. The first day at the office was something I will never forget. The company was in a modern building with huge windows that offered spectacular views of the city. I entered nervously but determined, shyly greeting the receptionist before being led to a small room where I met the rest of the interns. We were a diverse group from different places and backgrounds, but all with the same sparkle in our eyes. Each of us knew that being there was a privilege and an important step towards our future. My supervisor, Lillian, was a young and energetic woman who seemed to be in constant motion. From the first moment, she made it clear that she expected a lot from us, but also that she was there to help us grow. I was assigned a team project, and although I felt intimidated at first, I soon found my rhythm. With each passing day, my confidence grew, and for the first time, I felt that I was exactly where I should be. While my professional life began to take off, the tension with my family remained in the air, albeit at a distance. During the first week, my mother sent me several messages, all full of reproaches and veiled threats. "I hope you realize the mistake you are making," one said. "When all of this falls apart, do not expect us to be here to pick you up," said another. At first, those messages affected me. I found myself going over them in my mind again and again, wondering if I had really done the right thing. But little by little, I began to ignore them. Every time I felt the temptation to respond, I remembered that I was not obliged to justify my decisions. I had fought for my place, and no one was going to take it away from me. One day, while checking my email after work, I found an unexpected message. It came from my maternal grandmother, someone with whom I had always had a cordial but distant relationship. "Emily, I heard what happened," she wrote. "I want you to know that I am proud of you. I always knew you had something special. If you need anything, I am here." That message touched me deeply. Knowing that there was someone in my family who supported me, even if silently, gave me renewed strength. I replied, thanking her for her support and promising to visit her when I could. It was a small ray of light in the midst of the storm. But the calm did not last long. A few days later, while I was at the office reviewing some presentations, I received a call from an unknown number. I hesitated to answer, but something told me I should. On the other line was Chloe. "Emily, I need to talk to you," she said, her tone more serious than I had ever heard. "Something is happening at home, and I think you should know." My heart skipped a beat. I had been so focused on my new life that I had not thought about what might be happening with my parents. I hesitated for a moment but finally agreed to listen to her. Mom and Dad are furious with you. You already know that, she began, but it is not just that. They are going through financial problems. Mom is convinced that all of this is your fault because she says you abandoned them when they needed you most. Financial problems? I asked, confused. What does that have to do with me? Remember the taxi accident? Chloe continued, referring to her little disaster that had triggered all of this. The driver is still suing. And Mom and Dad are spending more than they have to resolve it. Mom even suggested that you use your internship salary to help them. I could not believe what I was hearing. Not only had they treated me like a stranger in my own family, but now they expected me to save the situation. As if I had any obligation to do so. Chloe, I am sorry, but this is not my problem. I replied firmly. They made their decisions, and now they had to deal with the consequences. I know, she said, surprising me. I just thought you should know. That night, I reflected on the conversation with Chloe. Part of me felt guilty, but another part knew that I could not sacrifice myself anymore for a family that had never valued me. I had spent too much time prioritizing their needs over mine, and now was the time to break that cycle. As I looked at the city lights from the window of my small apartment, I promised myself something. I would not back down again. I had worked hard to be where I was, and I was not going to let anyone make me feel guilty for pursuing my dreams. What I did not know was that my family was not going to give up so easily. After my conversation with Chloe, I tried to stay focused on my work and leave family problems in the background. But that calm did not last long. Just a few days later, I received a message from my mom, this time longer and loaded with drama. She said that they were on the verge of ruin because of Chloe's accident. That the taxi driver continued to demand an exorbitant compensation, and that I should help my family in this critical moment. The message ended with something that left me frozen. If you do not do the right thing, you will not be welcome back to this house. Ever. Although I already knew that our relationship was broken, reading it in black and white hurt me deeply. However, it also made something clear to me. No matter how much I sacrificed for them, it would never be enough. I decided to ignore the message. But then something unexpected happened. My parents showed up at my apartment unannounced. The only reason I let them in was because I did not want my neighbors to think there was a problem. But as soon as they crossed the threshold, they began their speech. Emily, we want to resolve this as a family. My dad began, trying to sound conciliatory. We know you have been busy and that all of this has caused you stress. But it is time for you to do your part. My part? I replied incredulously. After everything you have done? Trying to take away this opportunity from me? Calling me selfish for not sacrificing myself again for Chloe? You are part of this family. My mom intervened, ignoring my words. And as a family, we must help each other. We are in a difficult situation, and we know you can do something to alleviate it. What exactly do you expect me to do? I asked. Give you my salary? Quit my internship to run and save you? That would be a good start. My mom replied with a coldness that left me speechless. That is when everything came pouring out of me like a torrent. I told them how I had felt invisible my whole life. How they always put Chloe first. How they never cared about my dreams or my happiness. I told them that this internship was the first thing I had really done for myself and that I was not going to let them take it away from me. My dad tried to interrupt me, but I did not let him. I am not an ATM, nor your backup plan. It is time for you to accept the consequences of your own decisions. I am not going to sacrifice any more of my life for you. My mom looked at me as if she could not believe what she was hearing. We always knew you were selfish, she finally said, but this confirms that there is no hope for you. If that means that I am finally thinking about myself, then yes, I guess I am selfish. I replied, opening the apartment door. Now please leave. You have nothing else to do here. After they left, I felt exhausted but relieved. For the first time in a long time, I had defended my boundaries without giving in. But the peace was brief. That same night, I received a call from Chloe. Emily, Mom is hysterical, she said, her voice filled with worry. She says she does not know how they are going to solve this without you. Chloe, I am sorry, but I cannot continue being the solution to their problems. I replied, trying to remain calm. They have to find another way. I understand, she said after a long silence. I just wanted to tell you that, although Mom and Dad do not see it, I think what you did was brave. Her words surprised me, but I did not know how to respond. Thanks, I murmured. My parents did not try to contact me again, but their absence in my life was a constant reminder of what I had lost. Despite everything, I did not regret my decision. I knew that to grow and be happy, I had to distance myself from them. At the office, things continued to improve. My supervisor, Lillian, praised me for my work on an important project and even mentioned me as a candidate for an internship extension. For the first time in my life, I felt that my effort was being recognized, and that my worth did not depend on anyone else's approval. One afternoon, while checking my email, I saw a message from my grandmother. She told me that she had talked to my parents after all the drama and that they were beginning to realize that they could not control me like before. She also mentioned that she was proud of me for making a difficult but necessary decision. Emily has always been strong. She wrote, "I just hope that one day they see it too." As I read those words, I knew I was on the right track. I did not know if my relationship with my parents would ever improve. But for now, I was focused on myself and on building the life I had always dreamed of. And that, finally, was enough. Story 2. I discovered my girlfriend was messaging her married boss. So I broke up with her, sold everything, and went on our planned road trip alone. Then she tracked me down to Arizona to beg for forgiveness. I am 29 years old, and until a few weeks ago, I was in a relationship with someone I thought, until then, was my forever person. She is 28, and although I do not want to use her real name, let us call her M. We had been together for almost 5 years and were planning an epic adventure. A road trip from our city in North Carolina to the West Coast. A dream trip we had been planning for months. It all started one night when M was in the shower, and her phone rang on the kitchen table. I am not the type of person who snoops on other people's phones. But when I saw the name that appeared on the screen, my stomach dropped. It was her boss, someone she claimed was an older, married man with whom she had a strictly professional relationship. At least, that is what she had always said. The message was short and strange. "I hope you enjoyed last night. I still cannot get you out of my head." My hands started shaking. I tried to convince myself there must be a logical explanation. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe the message was not for her. But when I unlocked her phone and saw a thread of messages, my worst fears were confirmed. It was all too explicit. Messages full of innuendo. Details of encounters they had had on business trips. And confessions about how they both wished for more time together. It turned out this was not something recent. They had been doing this for months. There was even a mention of a weekend in Atlanta when I thought she was visiting her sick cousin. At that moment, I felt as if someone had punched me in the chest. This was someone with whom I had built plans, dreams, a life, and while I was working overtime to save for this trip, she was doing this. I sat in the kitchen chair, trying to process everything. I heard the shower water turn off and knew that in a matter of seconds, I would have to confront her. When she came out of the bathroom, wrapped in a towel, her hair still wet, I could not contain myself. I showed her the phone and said, "What is this?" The color drained from her face instantly. She tried to take the phone from my hands, but I kept it out of reach. She started with the excuses. "It is not what it looks like. It does not mean anything. I swear I love you." The confrontation lasted for hours. She told me it had been a mistake, that she was confused, and that he had manipulated her. But honestly, I could not even look at her. What hurt me the most was the lack of genuine remorse in her words. She seemed more concerned about the fact that I had discovered her than about the pain she was causing me. The next morning, while she was sleeping, I started packing my things. I decided I was not going to stay to hear more lies or to give her the opportunity to justify the unjustifiable. I called a friend to ask for help and moved to a nearby motel. I did not even bother to talk to her again. I just left her a note in the kitchen. "I hope he is worth it. I am leaving." That day, I canceled all our plans together, the Airbnb reservations, the campsites, and I even sold some of the things we had bought for the trip. Like the camping gear, I only kept my old Jeep, my backpack, and the maps we had marked together. This was a trip we had dreamed of together. But now it was going to be mine. Only mine. Just a few hours after moving to the motel, the messages and calls from M started. I went through a cycle of fury, sadness, and eventually, numbness. She begged me to listen to her, to give her another chance. She told me she was confused, that she had made a mistake. But I knew this was not something I could forgive. I had seen too much in those messages to believe this was a simple misunderstanding. The breaking point came when, days later, her boss called me. Her boss, a man I had never met, but who was now too involved in my life. He told me that M loved me and was willing to leave everything for me. I do not know what he expected to achieve with that call. But it only confirmed that I was surrounded by completely toxic people. It was then that I decided to turn off my phone, get in the Jeep, and just disappear. When I left the motel that morning, I did not have a specific destination in mind, but I knew I had to get away from everything that reminded me of M and the chaos I had left behind. I got in the Jeep, put on some music on the radio, and just started driving. My original plan had been to follow the itinerary M and I had created together. But now all of that seemed toxic to me. Every city, every point marked on the map was impregnated with what we used to be. With what I had lost. Instead, I decided to improvise. I took Interstate 40 west, with no other goal than to get out of North Carolina. As the miles passed, I felt somewhat lighter. It was as if every mile I put between Em and me helped to clear my mind. I had no idea where I was going, but for the first time in weeks, that did not worry me. I spent the first night at a small campsite near Nashville, Tennessee. It was a basic place, a few plots for tents, a community bonfire, and little else. I sat under the stars with a cold beer in hand and wondered how I had gotten there. A part of me was still angry, but another part was starting to feel something I had not experienced in a long time: freedom. The next morning, as I was packing up my tent, an older man who was camping nearby approached me. He said he had noticed my Jeep and asked where I was headed. I told him I did not know, that I was just driving west. He smiled and said, "Sometimes the best trips are the ones without a destination." Those words stayed with me for the rest of the day. As I continued west, I discovered a new routine. I woke up early, drove for hours, explored any place that caught my attention, and at nightfall, I looked for a place to sleep. Some days were more memorable than others. In Arkansas, I found a quiet lake where I spent hours just sitting in silence, listening to the sounds of the water. In Oklahoma, I met a group of backpackers at a bar who invited me to join them at a bonfire. It was the first time in weeks that I really laughed. However, not everything was so idyllic. The nights were still difficult. There were times when, alone in my tent or in the cab of my Jeep, the memories of Em came back strongly. I wondered if I had done the right thing by just leaving everything behind. There were so many what ifs that tormented me. What if I had given her a chance to explain herself better? What if I had confronted her boss? What if the problem was me? The lowest point came when I arrived in Amarillo, Texas. I had been driving all day and felt exhausted, both physically and emotionally. I stopped at a cheap motel, one of those places where the curtains barely cover the windows, and the carpet seems to have more history than national monuments. I could not sleep that night. I stayed awake, reviewing the few photos I still had on my phone of Em and me. For a moment, I almost called her, but just as my finger was about to touch her contact, I remembered what I had read in those messages. I remembered the pain in my chest, the feeling of betrayal. I turned off the phone and left it on the floor. That night, I made myself a promise. This trip was not going to be about Em. It was not going to be about what she had done to me or what I had lost. This trip was going to be about me. About finding something, even if I did not know what it was yet. The real change happened in New Mexico. I had taken a detour to Santa Fe because someone at a gas station had told me it was a magical place. And they were right. It was as if the whole city was imbued with art, culture, and a kind of tranquil energy that I had not felt in a long time. I spent a couple of days there, exploring markets, tasting food I had never eaten before, and simply enjoying being in a place where nobody knew me. It was in Santa Fe that I started writing. I had not written anything since college, but something in the atmosphere inspired me to take out a notebook and start jotting down my thoughts. At first, I just wrote about the trip, the places I had visited, the people I had met. But eventually, I started writing about Em, about what had happened, about how I felt. It was not easy, but it was cathartic. It was as if by putting those words on paper, I was letting the pain slip away from me. From Santa Fe, I continued to Arizona. There was something about the deserts that attracted me, a kind of arid beauty that seemed to reflect how I felt inside. I passed through Grand Canyon National Park, where I hiked to a viewpoint at sunset. As I looked at the immensity of the landscape, I realized something. The world was much bigger than my pain. There was so much to see, so much to do, and I could not let what she had done define the rest of my life. I had arrived in Sedona, Arizona, a place that I was told was known for its energy vortexes. I do not know if I really believe in those things, but there was something special about the landscape. The enormous red rock formations, the endless blue sky, and the fresh air made everything seem surreal. I had spent a couple of days there, exploring trails and taking photos. I felt that I was finally starting to find some peace. That morning, I had woken up early to watch the sunrise from Cathedral Rock, one of Sedona's most iconic landmarks. I got in the Jeep and drove to the trailhead. There were few people at that hour, which made the experience even more special. I reached the top just as the sun was beginning to peek over the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange, pink, and purple. For a moment, everything seemed to be in its place. I thought, maybe this trip is exactly what I need to rebuild myself. As I was coming down the trail, I noticed something I did not expect. A car parked near my Jeep that I recognized immediately. It was Em's gray Honda Civic. My heart stopped. What the hell was she doing here? For a second, I thought maybe I was hallucinating. But then I saw Em standing next to my Jeep. She was looking at her phone. apparently waiting for something. I did not know what to do. Part of me wanted to turn around and hide among the rocks. But another part knew I could not avoid this forever. I took a deep breath, adjusted my backpack, and walked towards her. When she saw me, her eyes filled with tears. "I found you," she said, as if it were something heroic. I did not say anything at first. I just stood there looking at her, trying to process the fact that she had traveled hundreds of miles to find me. Finally, I replied, "What are you doing here, Em?" She started talking quickly, almost without breathing. "I could not stay at home knowing that I had lost you. I have been looking for you for days. No one would tell me where you were, not even your family. I knew this trip was important to you, so I thought maybe you were following the itinerary. I went to some of the places we had marked on the map, but I could not find you. Finally, I got here. I thought I would see you at the Grand Canyon, but something told me to come to Sedona, and here you are." I could not believe what I was hearing. She had crossed entire states looking for me, and all I could think was, why could not she have put this energy into saving our relationship before ruining it? "Em, I cannot do this with you. Not after everything that happened. Do you really think showing up here is going to fix everything?" I tried to keep my voice calm, but the weariness could be heard in my tone. "Please, just listen to me," she begged. "I know I made a mistake. I am so sorry. I do not know why I did what I did, but I love you. I love you more than anything, and I am willing to do whatever it takes to make this work. Please do not leave me." For a moment, I remained silent, letting her words hang in the air. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw those messages again. I could not forget the betrayal, the humiliation. Finally, I replied, "This is not something I can fix with words. Em, you did something to me that I cannot forgive. It is not just about what happened with your boss, it is about you lying to me, betraying me when I trusted you the most. This trip was my way of escaping from all that, from you, and now you show up here as if that could erase what you did. I cannot do this." She started crying, this time uncontrollably. She dropped to the ground as if the weight of everything she had done had finally caught up with her. "I cannot live without you," she sobbed. "Please do not leave me. I will do anything you ask." It was at that moment that I realized something. Em was not here because she really wanted to fix things. She was here because she could not handle the consequences of her own actions. This was not love, it was selfishness. She wanted me to forgive her so she could feel better about herself. Not because she really understood the damage she had caused. "Em, you need to understand something," I said in a firmer tone. "This trip is for me. Not for us. Not for you. I am rebuilding myself, trying to find some peace after what you did. And I cannot do that if you keep chasing me. So I am going to ask you this once. Go home. Let me go." She looked at me with tears streaming down her face. And for a moment, I thought she was going to listen. But then her expression changed. Her eyes hardened, and she said, "Are you really going to throw 5 years away? Everything we built together? For one mistake? That is all it was." Her words were confirmation that she did not understand anything. "No, Em," I replied. "I am not the one throwing anything away. It was you." I turned around, got in my Jeep, and closed the door. She banged on the window, yelling something I could not understand. But I did not care. I started the engine and drove away without looking back. That night, I camped in a remote spot in the Arizona desert, under a sky full of stars. For the first time in weeks, I felt something I had almost forgotten: relief. Finally, I felt that I was in control of my life again. That night in the desert was different. Although I was still carrying the weight of what had happened, something had changed. Confronting Em in Sedona, looking her in the eyes while she tried to justify the unjustifiable, gave me a clarity that I did not know I needed. It was as if seeing her there, begging but without really accepting her guilt, had freed me from something. I finally understood that there was no turning back. And most importantly, that I did not want to go back. At dawn, I packed up and continued driving west. My next destination was Flagstaff. But instead of rushing, I decided to take back roads and enjoy the scenery. The highway seemed to stretch endlessly before me, surrounded by distant mountains and vast desert landscapes. There was something deeply healing in the immensity of it all. It reminded me that although my personal world had crumbled, the world itself kept turning. In Flagstaff, I found a small cafe in the city center. While waiting for my coffee, I overheard a group of hikers talking about Joshua Tree National Park. One of them described the unique trees and rock formations as if they were from another planet. Something in that description caught me, and I decided that would be my next destination. The road to Joshua Tree was long and lonely, but that was just what I needed. Each mile took me further away from Em, from the city we had shared, and from the memories that tormented me. During the drive, I began to reflect on the last 5 years of my life. How had I not seen the signs? Was there something I could have done differently? These questions haunted me constantly. But instead of feeling guilty, I began to accept them as part of my healing process. Arriving at Joshua Tree, I felt as if I had entered another world. The twisted trees and rock formations looked like natural sculptures, each telling its own story. I camped in a remote part of the park, surrounded by absolute silence. That night, as I looked at the stars, something clicked inside me. This trip was no longer just a way to escape from M. It was a way to rediscover myself. I began to adopt a new routine. Instead of just driving aimlessly, I now looked for places that made me feel alive. I spent days exploring the trails of Joshua Tree, climbing rocks, and finding small hidden caves. One morning, while sitting on a rock watching the sunrise, a thought hit me hard. I had spent so much time defining myself by us. This led to an exercise that became an essential part of my trip. Every night before going to sleep, I would write in my notebook something I had learned about myself that day. At first, they were simple things, like, I like being alone more than I thought, or, I can survive without a detailed plan. But over time, the reflections became deeper. I discovered that I was afraid of being alone, not because I could not handle it but because it made me face my own thoughts. I also realized that for years, I had let my relationships define my self-worth. From Joshua Tree, I continued to California. I decided I wanted to see the ocean, so I drove to the coast. When I arrived in a small town called Cambria, I parked the Jeep at a viewpoint and walked to the beach. It was a cloudy day, with waves crashing against the rocks and a cool breeze carrying the smell of salt. I sat on the sand and simply watched the ocean, letting the sound of the waves fill the void I had felt for weeks. It was on that beach that I finally did something I had been avoiding. I opened my phone and checked my messages. There were dozens of them, mostly from M. Some were long and emotional, while others were short and full of rage. It took me a while to read them all, and when I finished, I simply deleted them. I did not reply to any. Not because I was angry, but because I no longer saw the point. I had closed that chapter and was not going to open it again. I decided to stay in Cambria for a few days. I rented a small cabin near the beach and spent the mornings walking along the shore and the afternoons writing in my notebook. One night, while reviewing my notes, I realized something important. I was not writing about M as much as I had been at the beginning. Instead, I was writing about myself, about what I wanted for my future, about the things that made me happy. On my last day in Cambria, I met an older couple who were celebrating their 40th anniversary. We sat down to talk at a cafe, and they shared some stories of their life together. When I told them about my trip and what had happened, the woman smiled and said, "Sometimes people come into our lives to teach us lessons, not to stay. It seems you have learned yours. Now it is time to move on." Her words stayed with me as I drove north towards San Francisco. This trip, which had begun as a way to escape, was becoming something completely different. I was not running away from my past, I was embracing my future. When I arrived in San Francisco, I felt a mix of emotions. There was something electrifying about the city, with its bustle and iconic landscapes like the Golden Gate Bridge and Alcatraz. Although I did not plan to stay long, I wanted to enjoy the feeling of anonymity amidst so much activity. I found a hostel near Fisherman's Wharf and spent my days exploring the city. Walking down Lombard Street, getting lost in Chinatown, and watching the sunset from Twin Peaks. As I watched the city lights twinkle in the distance one night, I realized something. I no longer felt so heavy. The pain was still there, of course, but it had lessened. It was more manageable. For weeks, I had felt as if my life was defined by M's betrayal. But now that narrative was beginning to crumble. This trip had not only been a way to heal, it had also given me a completely new perspective on who I was and what I wanted for my life. After a few days in San Francisco, I decided it was time to start my journey back. I had reached the furthest point west that I wanted to explore. And although I knew I was not completely healed, I felt I had reached enough emotional closure to face my old life. But this time, the trip back was not about running away or searching for answers. It was a transition to something new. On the way back, I decided to stop at some places I had overlooked before. In Oregon, I found a small state park with waterfalls that seemed straight out of a fairy tale. I spent a whole day there, hiking trails and letting myself be soaked by the tranquility of the place. In Idaho, I discovered an antique shop in a tiny town and ended up buying an old road map from the 1950s. Something I thought perfectly symbolized this trip. A reminder that there are always new roads to explore, even when you think you already know the way. When I crossed back into Colorado, where some of the most majestic mountains in the country rose before me, I stopped at an alpine lake and sat by the shore with my notebook. I wrote a letter to M. Not to send it, but to get everything I had not said before out of my system. I wrote about the pain, the betrayal, and the disappointment, but I also wrote about what I had learned thanks to that experience. At the end of the letter, I wrote, "I wish you the best. But I do not wish you back." I closed the notebook, stood up, and put it in my backpack. The letter would never reach her hands. But it was no longer necessary. When I finally returned to North Carolina, I did not immediately return to the house Em and I had shared. Instead, I rented a small apartment on the outskirts of the city. It was modest, but big enough for me. And most importantly, it was a space completely my own. One of the first things I did was hang the old map I had bought in Idaho on the living room wall. It was my daily reminder that there are always new horizons, even when it seems like your world is falling apart. Eventually, I reconnected with my friends and family, who had been worried about me during my absence. I told them about my trip, omitting the most painful details but sharing enough for them to understand what had happened. They all agreed that I looked different, more self-assured, calmer, and in a way, they were right. I had found something on that trip that I had lost a long time ago, myself. A few months after my return, I received an unexpected message. It was from Em. It said something like, "I hope you are well. I have been thinking a lot about us. If you ever want to talk, I am here." I stared at the screen for a moment before closing the message and archiving it. I did not feel anger or sadness, just indifference. I did not need to respond. She was no longer part of my story. Story 3. My sister-in-law had been lying and manipulating me for years. And her plan was much more sinister than I imagined. When I first met my partner's sister, I thought it would be an interesting challenge to get along. Since I was little, I have always been a sociable person, someone who enjoys family dynamics. My partner had talked a lot about his sister before we met, mentioning that she was not thrilled about my arrival in the family. Our relationship began with small, awkward moments that I tried to ignore. I am not one to look for trouble, and I believed that over time we would find some common ground. But looking back, perhaps it was a mistake to try to keep the peace without setting clear boundaries. If I had known what was coming, I would have put a stop to it from the beginning. Our first major interaction was during a family dinner to which my partner invited me. We were celebrating his birthday, and I had spent hours preparing a special cake. When we arrived, his sister, who was already there, gave me a tense smile and commented, "Oh, you brought a cake? How brave, considering what I usually make." I laughed, thinking it was a joke. But when she pulled a giant homemade cake out of the refrigerator, I understood that the comment was not casual. During dinner, she did not miss an opportunity to point out details, that the cake was too sweet, that my dress was too formal for the occasion, or that the wrapping of the gift I gave my partner could have been more creative. My partner tried to mediate, changing the subject and making me feel included, but it was evident that his sister was not interested in accepting my presence. The passive-aggressive comments continued over time, but what really marked a before and after was when my partner and I decided to move in together. We found a small apartment in a quiet neighborhood. It was not the most luxurious place, but for us, it meant independence and a step towards our future. Just a few weeks after we settled in, his sister showed up unannounced. She came loaded with boxes of decorations and began to say that our place looked empty and depressing. Before I could protest, she was already rearranging our living room, moving furniture, and taking out the things we had bought together. The most uncomfortable thing was that when my partner arrived home, she managed to make it seem as if I had willingly accepted all her help. "Your partner loved what I did," she told him with a smile. To avoid starting an argument, I let the incident pass. But I felt that she had crossed a line. It was our space, our life, and she simply barged in without consideration. From there, the unplanned visits became constant. At first, she brought food or a plant to brighten up the space, but soon she began to question our financial decisions. I would encounter comments like, "Why did you choose this neighborhood? There are much better places." Or, "Are you sure you can afford the rent here? I do not want you to get into financial trouble." At first, I thought her comments stemmed from genuine concern. But then I noticed something strange in the way she insisted on knowing how much we earned and how we distributed our expenses. She was invasive in a way that did not feel natural. One day, when my partner and I were organizing our finances, I discovered something alarming. Reviewing some payments, I noticed an automatic debit that I did not recognize. It was a small but constant monthly charge that I had never authorized. When I looked for more details, I realized that the debit was linked to a secondary account that I did not recognize as ours. When I mentioned it, my partner was also surprised. He had no idea what it was. That is when we began to suspect that someone had manipulated our accounts. But we never imagined who. At first, we ruled out the possibility that it was something internal. We thought it could be a bank error or even external fraud. However, weeks later, we found a clue that changed everything. My partner, reviewing an old family chat, noticed that his sister had made a casual comment about a service we used, which we had never discussed with her. When we asked her directly, she was evasive, but her answers left more questions than answers. We decided to confront her together. When we did, she flatly denied everything, but her attitude suddenly changed. Her visits decreased, and it seemed that she avoided any direct interaction with me. My partner wanted to believe her, but I felt that something was not right. From then on, I started noticing that small things at home were out of place. Personal items that disappeared or papers that had been moved. It was unsettling. I tried to talk to my partner about my concerns, but he was convinced that his sister was not capable of doing something so manipulative. She is intense, yes, but I do not think she would do it with bad intentions, he said. I decided to give her the benefit of the doubt, but something inside me told me not to let my guard down. What I did not know at that time was that this would be just the first of many warning signs. His sister was weaving a web of manipulation that went far beyond what I could imagine. And eventually, her interference would jeopardize not only our financial stability but our entire lives. After our first confrontation, things with my sister-in-law calmed down a bit. Her visits decreased, and although she still made passive-aggressive comments when we saw each other at family gatherings, it seemed like she was trying to maintain some distance. For a while, I thought things had returned to normal. However, it was not long before more signs began to emerge that something was wrong. One day, while checking my mail, I noticed something strange. There was a letter from an insurance company that I did not recognize. It said that our apartment was enrolled in a rental insurance policy. But we already had our own policy, and had for months. I thought it might be a mistake, but when I called the contact number, I was told that someone had registered our address under their name, and that someone was my sister-in-law. At first, I could not understand what she was doing. Why would she have registered an insurance policy for our apartment? When I mentioned this to my partner, he was as confused as I was. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it had been a clerical error. But deep down, I knew something was not right. My partner decided to call her to clarify the matter. During the call, she acted as if she had no idea what we were talking about. She seemed offended and annoyed that we were accusing her of something so absurd. She said she had no reason to do something like that it was surely a system error. Although the explanation did not entirely convince us, we decided to let it go for the moment. Maybe, as she said, it was a simple mistake. But then things started to happen that made it impossible to ignore. Shortly after, I began to notice that important documents were missing from home. We kept all our papers in a filing cabinet in the living room. But when I went to look for our rental agreement to check some details, it was not there. I checked the filing cabinet several times, and nothing. Other documents, like receipts and bank statements, had also disappeared. When I mentioned it to my partner, he was as worried as I was. We both wondered if someone had been snooping around our house. It was then that I remembered something disturbing. My sister-in-law had a copy of our key. When we moved, we gave her a copy in case of an emergency. Something that now seemed like a naive decision. My partner insisted that she would never do something as invasive as entering our house without permission. But my intuition told me otherwise. We decided to change the locks but did not mention anything to her. We just wanted to avoid any possible incident. However, the change seemed to trigger something in her. A week later, she showed up at our door unannounced, asking why she could not enter with her key. We told her we had changed the locks as a precaution, to which she responded with an uncomfortable laugh, saying, "Well, I hope you are not hiding anything." Although she said it jokingly, there was something in her look that made me feel that she was not joking at all. After that incident, we decided to be more careful. We moved all our documents to a safe place and began to be more attentive to anything suspicious. But my sister-in-law soon found another way to get involved in our lives. A short time later, my partner received a call from our landlady. She was upset because she had received a notice that we planned to terminate our lease. The strange thing was that neither my partner nor I had requested anything like that. When we investigated further, we discovered that someone had forged our signature on a letter addressed to the landlady. The situation was surreal. Why would anyone want to sabotage our lease? We immediately thought of my sister-in-law, but we had no concrete proof. We decided to talk to our landlady and explain that we had not sent that letter. Fortunately, she believed us, but this was a breaking point for me. It was clear that someone was trying to interfere in our lives maliciously. And I could not ignore the possibility that it was my sister-in-law. However, when my partner tried to talk to her about it, she again denied everything. She became defensive once more and acted as if we were the paranoid ones. What really made me lose my patience was an incident that occurred a few weeks later. We were out to dinner with some friends when I received a text message from an unknown number. It was a photo of our living room. The image clearly showed that someone had been inside our house while we were not there. The person who sent the message did not say anything else, but I knew exactly who it was. My partner tried to reassure me, saying that maybe it was a prank, but I could not get it out of my head that there was something darker behind this. We decided to report the incident to the police, but without concrete evidence, they could not do much. However, this made it clear to me that I could no longer ignore what was happening. My sister-in-law was crossing boundaries, and something told me that what she had done so far was just the beginning. After the incident with the photo in our living room, my patience was wearing thin. We had changed the locks, stored our documents in a safe place, and avoided leaving clues about our routine. But it seemed that nothing was enough. Someone was determined to make us feel unsafe in our own home. And everything pointed to my sister-in-law. However, I did not have enough evidence to confront her directly, and my partner still wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt. That is when I decided to take matters into my own hands. We installed discrete security cameras in the apartment, covering the main entry points. I did not mention this to anyone, not even my partner. I did not want her to know in case she was responsible. I just wanted answers. During the first few weeks, we did not capture anything unusual. But that changed one afternoon. We had gone out to do some shopping, and when I checked the camera recordings, I saw something that left me frozen. My sister-in-law had been at our door, trying to open it with her old key. When she could not get in, she leaned towards the lock as if examining it. Then she took out her phone and appeared to take a picture of the entrance before hurrying away. My heart was pounding. Now I had something tangible, proof that she was acting suspiciously. I showed the video to my partner that same night. At first, he tried to justify it by saying that maybe she had just stopped by chance. But even he knew that did not make sense. Why would she try to use a key she already knew would not work? We decided to confront her together, this time with the video as evidence. When we went to her house, she acted surprised to see us. My partner, visibly upset, showed her the video. Her response was predictable. She denied everything. She said she had simply stopped by our house to drop something off, but had not entered because we were out. When we asked her what she wanted to leave, she could not give a coherent answer. "Why are you so paranoid?" she asked with a nervous smile. But her attitude changed when we told her that we had installed cameras and that now we could see who came and went. Her face paled. At that moment, something changed. She started yelling, accusing us of treating her like a criminal. Her reaction was so exaggerated that even my partner was speechless. "I do not need to enter your damn apartment," she yelled. "You are not that important." But as she said this, her words betrayed her tone. There was something more behind her rage. We returned home, feeling even more distrustful. My partner, although he still wanted to believe his sister, could not ignore what we had seen. We decided to limit all contact with her. But then, a week later, something happened that confirmed that she was plotting something much more serious. One morning, while I was having my coffee and checking my mail, I saw a message from our landlord. It said that we had accumulated several months of unpaid rent and that if we did not resolve the situation immediately, they would start the eviction process. My blood ran cold. I knew this could not be true. We had always paid on time, and I had the receipts to prove it. I immediately called the landlord, and what he told me left me completely bewildered. According to him, someone had contacted his office weeks earlier, saying that we wanted to change the payment account associated with the rent. They had provided information for a new bank account for the automatic debits. And for 2 months, the payments had been rejected. When I asked who had made the request, they told me that the person had identified themselves as my personal assistant. Of course, we had never authorized anything like that. I immediately understood what was happening. This was not a simple mistake. Someone had manipulated our accounts. What worried me the most was how they had obtained the information necessary to make the change. It was then that I remembered the documents that had disappeared from our file months earlier. Everything was starting to fit together. With this information, we contacted the bank to find out more details. At first, they could not give us much information due to privacy policies. But after presenting the documents that proved our identity, they revealed something that left us breathless. The bank account associated with the rejected payments was registered in my sister-in-law's name. This revelation hit us like a bucket of cold water. We now had concrete proof that she had been manipulating our finances. My partner was devastated. He never imagined that his sister could do something like this. We decided to act immediately. We went to the police and filed a report. We knew this could escalate, but we could no longer ignore what was happening. However, what we discovered after involving the authorities was even more alarming. During the investigation, it came to light that my sister-in-law had been accumulating massive debts over the years. Her intention in redirecting our payments was to use the money to cover her own expenses. But the most disturbing thing was discovering that this was not all. There was something bigger she was planning. Something we had not even imagined. With the evidence in hand and a police report filed, we thought we had reached the climax of the nightmare. However, we were wrong. What had started as a series of annoying and suspicious incidents was about to transform into a direct and deliberate attack on our stability. And worst of all, we did not see coming how far my sister-in-law was willing to go. A few days after filing the report, we received a call from the police. They wanted to inform us that, upon tracking the financial movements of my sister-in-law's account, they had discovered something more disturbing. Not only had she been redirecting our rent to her account, but she had used the information from our missing documents to open several lines of credit in my partner's name. This explained how she had been financing her extravagant lifestyle while insisting that she had financial problems and needed help. We felt completely betrayed. My partner was in shock. He had grown up with his sister, trusting her as a close figure. And now he was facing the reality that she had not only stolen from us but was putting his financial future at risk. The most worrying thing was that the police believed this was not an impulsive act. Everything pointed to a carefully crafted plan. While we were trying to digest this information, we received another unexpected blow. A letter arrived at our house, this time addressed to both of us. It had no return address but contained a handwritten message that left me frozen. "I know what you are doing, and you will not get away with it. I have rights too." There was no signature, but the handwriting looked familiar. It was my sister-in-law's. My partner did not want to believe it, but I was sure. It was her attempt to intimidate us. The next day, we decided to talk to our neighbors, asking if they had seen anything suspicious. It was then that one of them told us that a woman had been hanging around our house recently. They described someone who perfectly matched my sister-in-law's description. They said they had seen her taking pictures and writing things down in a notebook. This put us on high alert. We did not know what she was planning, but it was clear that she would not stop easily. That night, while trying to sleep, I could not stop thinking about what she might be plotting. I checked the security cameras again, and there it was, a video of her prowling around our entrance. This time in broad daylight. She seemed to be checking the windows, as if looking for a way to get in. This was enough for us to make a final decision. It was time to get a restraining order. The next morning, we went to the police station with the video and explained the situation. The police agreed that there was a clear pattern of harassment and intrusion. They helped us file the restraining order application, and while we waited for it to be approved, we changed our locks again and hired a more advanced security system. We also notified our landlord and asked them to be cautious with any requests related to our housing. But the most shocking moment came when the police called us to inform us that they had spoken to my sister-in-law as part of the investigation. What she told them left us speechless. She claimed that everything she had done, from redirecting our payments to trying to access our apartment, was for our own good. According to her, my partner did not know how to manage his finances, and she was intervening to prevent us from ruining our lives. This, of course, was a blatant attempt to justify her behavior. But what followed was even more alarming. The police informed us that during the interrogation, she mentioned that she had plans to rescue my partner from our relationship. According to her distorted version, I was a negative influence and was leading her brother down the wrong path. She went so far as to claim that she had been collecting evidence to prove that I was a bad partner and that my partner would be better off without me. This explained the photos of our living room, the missing documents, and her constant intrusion. At this point, my partner finally understood the seriousness of the situation. For years, he had been ignoring the signs and trying to keep the peace. But now he realized that his sister had an unhealthy obsession with controlling his life. We decided to cut off all contact with her immediately. But before we could take definitive action, something happened that forced us to act even faster. One night, while we were at home, we heard a loud banging on the front door. It was my sister-in-law, yelling and demanding that we open up. We looked through the cameras and saw her in a furious attitude, waving an envelope that seemed to contain papers. We did not open the door, but we could hear her yelling things like, "You cannot keep me away from my family," and "This is not over." We called the police immediately. When they arrived, she was still there, refusing to leave. She tried to justify herself by saying that she just wanted to talk. But the situation had already escalated too much. She was arrested for violating our privacy and for harassment. As they took her away, she yelled that this was my fault and that I had brainwashed her brother. That night, my partner and I sat in the living room, processing what had happened. We realized that his sister was not only trying to control him but was trying to destroy our relationship. The most terrifying thing was that we still did not know if there was anything else she was hiding. After my sister-in-law's arrest, we thought the worst was over. However, the true extent of her actions was about to be revealed, and what we discovered was even more disturbing than we imagined. While she remained in custody, the police continued to investigate her movements, and we tried to regain some normalcy in our lives. It was not easy, as we continued to feel that shadow of uncertainty about how far her manipulation had gone. A week later, we received a call from the officer in charge of the case. He asked us to come to the police station because there was important news we should know. My partner and I went immediately, and what they revealed to us that afternoon was devastating. During the analysis of the electronic devices confiscated from my sister-in-law, the police found evidence of a much larger and more sinister plan. On my sister-in-law's laptop, there was a detailed file containing information about our finances, daily routines, and, most disturbingly, a draft of an application for custody of my partner. Her plan was to demonstrate that I was a bad influence on her brother and that he was not capable of managing his life without her help. In some documents, there were even notes about how she wanted to convince our landlady to evict us, with the purpose of making my partner dependent on her again. It seemed like a sick obsession to control everything. The file also contained screenshots of our social media and emails. We had no idea how she had accessed this information, but authorities confirmed that she had installed spyware on my partner's computer during one of her visits. This explained how she always seemed to know things we had never told her. One of the most shocking revelations was discovering that she had used our identities to apply for loans in her name. The money was not only used to cover her debts but also to finance an extravagant lifestyle that included trips, luxury clothes, and expensive dinners. She had built a facade for her social circle, making them believe that she was successful and self-sufficient when in reality she was stealing from us to maintain that lie. But what left us completely stunned was a folder containing photos of my partner and me in everyday situations. Some seemed to have been taken from her car while we were at home or in the park walking our dog. There was a chilling sense of invasion upon seeing those images, as if we had been watched all this time. When my partner saw all of this, he broke down. He could not understand how his sister, someone with whom he had shared his whole life, could have planned something so twisted. For my part, although I was equally shocked, I also felt a mix of relief and determination. We finally had conclusive proof of everything she had done, and we were ready to take action. With all this evidence, we worked with a lawyer to ensure that my sister-in-law faced the appropriate legal consequences. We filed additional charges for identity theft, financial fraud, and also processed a permanent restraining order that would protect not only us but also anyone else she might try to harm in the future. Meanwhile, my partner's family was completely divided. His parents were devastated. They could not understand how their daughter, whom they had always considered a sensitive person, could have fallen so low. His mother initially tried to justify it, saying that maybe it was all a misunderstanding, or that she needed help, but the evidence was too clear. His father, on the other hand, was furious and took a firm stance by cutting off all contact with her. Some other relatives began to blame us, saying things like, "Maybe if you had been more understanding with her, this would not have happened." Or, "Why did you decide to involve the police? It is a family matter." Although these words hurt, we knew we had made the right decision. It was not something we could resolve internally. What she did was a crime. The case progressed quickly due to the amount of evidence presented. My sister-in-law was sentenced to several years in prison for the multiple crimes she had committed and was ordered to pay restitution for the money she had stolen. Although it was a small consolation after everything we had been through, it was a step towards justice. After her sentencing, we discovered something else that partly explained her behavior. It turned out that she had been struggling with mental health problems for years but had never sought professional help. This did not justify what she did, but it shed some light on why she had acted in such an obsessive and destructive way. Her husband, who had been completely in the dark about her actions, filed for divorce shortly after everything came to light. Although justice was served, my partner and I still felt the after effects of what happened. There were days when I felt paranoid, checking our bank accounts and making sure there were no more surprises. My partner, for his part, had to deal with the guilt and pain of losing his relationship with his sister. However, over time, we managed to rebuild our trust and stability. We also strengthened our relationship by learning to be more open and honest with each other. Story 4. My family is forcing me to cancel my baby shower to prioritize my brother's wedding. But I decided to keep my party. And now I am the villain. I am Emily. I am 29 years old, and I am expecting my first baby with my husband, Lucas, 30 years old. Before I begin, I want to say that my relationship with my family has always been complicated. I have a younger brother, Aiden, 26 years old, and if there is something I can say with certainty, It is that he has been my parents' golden child for as long as I can remember. The story begins a few months ago when Lucas and I announced that we were going to be parents. It was a special moment. We had been trying for years. And finally, after so many obstacles, we were excited to share the news with our families. My parents acted excited, but their enthusiasm did not last long. Especially after Aiden started talking about his own important plans. Do not misunderstand me, I love my brother, but he has always been the type of person who needs all the attention. So I was not surprised when he decided to announce his engagement to his girlfriend. Sophie, 23 years old. Barely a week after my news. So far so good, everyone has their moments, right? But things started to get complicated when I decided to organize a baby shower to celebrate the arrival of my baby. Lucas and I scheduled the baby shower for a particular Saturday since it was the only weekend that worked for both our schedule and that of our friends and family. The planning was simple. We rented a small hall, ordered catering, and hired a photographer to capture the moment. We were excited until I received a call from my mother. Emily, dear, Aiden and Sophie have decided to move their wedding forward, and they will have it on the same day as your baby shower. She told me with a mix of nervousness and expectation, as if she already knew I was about to explode. What? I replied, unable to believe what I was hearing. The same day? Why? My mother, as always, tried to soften it. Well, Sophie got a beautiful dress, and they do not want to wait. Besides, Aiden thought it would be a perfect date because the whole family will already be in town for your event. Exactly. My own brother used my baby shower as an excuse to schedule his last-minute wedding. I tried to remain calm, but when I asked them why they could not choose another day, my mother's response was that love does not wait. Then came the final blow. She suggested I cancel my baby shower so that everyone could attend the wedding without conflict. Emily, you understand, a baby shower is not as important as a wedding. Besides, you have your whole life to celebrate your baby. But a wedding is a once-in-a-lifetime moment. She insisted. Of course, I refused. Lucas and I had spent time, money, and energy planning the event. Besides, why did I have to be the one to give in, when I told her that I was not going to cancel anything? My mother was deeply offended. You always do this, Emily. You always think only of yourself. Why can't you be a good sister for once? And so began the drama. Aiden called me the next day pretending to be understanding. Listen, Em, it's not a big deal. You know, you could move your baby shower to Sunday or even do it on Zoom. Sophie and I really want the family to be with us on this special day. What he really meant was that he needed all the attention that day. I replied that I was not going to move anything. It's already planned. Aiden, if your wedding is so important, why don't you choose another date? His tone immediately changed. Are you serious? Why do you have to be so selfish? It's not just about you. Emily, you've always had this complex of wanting to be the center of attention. That was like a slap in the face. Me, the one who had always been relegated to the background, was being accused of being selfish. I hung up before saying something I could not take back. However, the worst was just beginning. After hanging up on Aiden, I sat down with Lucas to tell him what had happened. He was as indignant as I was. Do they really expect you to cancel your baby shower? This is ridiculous, he said as he checked the invitations on his phone. We've planned this for weeks. You can't just undo everything because your brother wants attention. It was clear that Lucas supported me, but the rest of my family did not. The next day, I started receiving messages from my aunts, cousins, and even close family friends. Everyone had the same line. Emily, you can't move your baby shower. Aiden's wedding is something unique. One of my cousins even had the audacity to suggest, maybe you can do something smaller at home and let the family be with him that day. To be honest, that was what hurt the most. It was not just my mother and brother, now. Everyone was taking sides. It seemed like no one valued my effort or the fact that this was a special moment for Lucas and me. I tried to explain to them that we had already made plans and that canceling was not an option. But most of them simply did not want to listen. Then came the moment I feared the most. My mother organized an emergency family meeting, supposedly to talk about the conflict. But we all knew her intention was to pressure me to give in. Lucas insisted on accompanying me. And thank goodness he did. Because as soon as we entered, the atmosphere was hostile. My mother spoke first, with her best victim tone. Emily, dear, I do not understand why you are being so stubborn about this. We just want everyone to be together to celebrate your brother's love. And what about celebrating the arrival of our baby? I replied, this is not just a baby shower. It's an important moment for us. And you are trying to minimize it. Aiden interrupted with his typical air of superiority. Come on, Emily, you're not having a baby tomorrow. What does it matter to move it a few weeks or make it more discreet? Lucas could not keep quiet. Why does Emily have to move her event? Why not you guys? Do you even know how inconsiderate what you're asking is? The discussion became more heated than I expected. My father, who rarely gets involved in these things, tried to mediate, but only made things worse by saying, Emily, it's not that your baby shower is not important, but you have to admit that a wedding carries more weight. We just want you to be reasonable. That was the last straw. Reasonable? I exploded. You know what's not reasonable? Planning a last-minute wedding and then demanding that I change my plans to accommodate you. This baby is my priority. Not Aiden's need to be the center of attention. At that point, my mother started crying. I can't believe you're willing to divide the family over something as insignificant as a baby shower. It was there when I decided that I was not going to tolerate it anymore. Insignificant? This is not about the baby shower. Mom, this is about you always prioritizing Aiden over me. And I am tired of being last in everything. If you do not want to support me, fine, but do not expect me to stay quiet while you walk all over me. Lucas took my hand and said, we're done here. And with that, we left the meeting. After the explosive family meeting, Lucas and I decided to focus on our baby shower and let the situation calm down. But as expected, that did not happen. 2 days later, I received a group message from my mother addressed to the whole family. The tone was aggressive from the beginning. Dear family, it's a shame that Emily has decided to keep her baby shower on such an important date for Aiden and Sophie. As you know, they have worked very hard to get to this moment and deserve to celebrate with them without distractions. I hope we can all show our support by choosing the right thing that day. I was speechless as I read the message. They were not only discrediting me but basically asking the whole family to boycott my event. Lucas, who had also read the message, was furious. This is pure manipulation. They have the nerve to make it public so that everyone takes their side. Before I could react, my cousin Lily, who has always been close to me, replied to the group, what does the right thing mean? Aunt, Emily has been planning this for weeks. And we all knew about her baby shower before they announced Aiden's wedding. This is not fair to her. Lily's message ignited a spark. Other relatives began to intervene, some defending Aiden and others supporting me. It was chaos. My mother tried to appease things with another condescending message. It's not about taking sides. Family, I simply believe that we can all recognize that a baby shower is something that can be moved. A wedding is not. That only fueled the flames more. My aunt, Savannah, known for not mincing words, replied, with all due respect, Aiden's wedding could have been planned better. I do not see why Emily has to change anything. If you do not support both children equally, then do not expect all of us to do so. As I read the messages, I felt a mixture of gratitude and anxiety. On the one hand, I was glad that some family members were defending me. On the other hand, I was terrified that this fight would become bigger than it already was. In the middle of the discussion, Aiden intervened. Stop fighting, please. Sophie and I do not want to cause problems. This is just a misunderstanding. We did not want this to become so complicated. That made me even angrier. Misunderstanding? After weeks of pressuring me to cancel my event? Lucas told me not to respond. But I could not help it. My patience had reached its limit. A misunderstanding. Aiden, you and Mom have done everything possible to minimize what this moment means to me. It is not a misunderstanding when you deliberately choose the same day. Knowing that I already had plans. If you really didn't want problems, you would have changed your date. Not manipulating everyone into prioritizing your wedding over my baby shower. The group remained silent for a few minutes after my message. But the discussion did not end there. My mother decided to call me that night. At first, I did not want to answer. But Lucas convinced me that maybe it was time to set clear boundaries. When I answered, she was crying. Emily, I cannot believe what you are doing to this family. She began, her voice full of drama. Your dad and I just want us all to be together. Why are you being so hard on Aiden? He needs our support now more than ever. His wedding is important, and my baby is not? I replied, trying to stay calm. Mom, I am tired of you always prioritizing Aiden. This is not just about the baby shower. It is about a lifetime of being relegated to the background. This baby is my priority. And if you cannot understand that, then you do not need to be involved. My mother was silent for a few seconds before exploding. If you do not want to be part of this family, then do not be. But do not expect Aiden to include you in his life after this. You are ruining everything out of selfishness. That was enough for me. Mom, if you think I am being selfish for not canceling an event I had already planned, then I do not know what else to tell you. Do what you want. If you want to come, you are invited. If not, it's your decision. I hung up before she could respond. That night, Lucas and I decided to send a message to all the guests at our baby shower. Briefly explaining the situation, we said that we understood if they had commitments to the wedding but that everyone was welcome and that we were excited to celebrate with those who could attend. We did not expect anything more. After sending our message to the baby shower guests, Lucas and I tried to move forward with our plans. We had already assumed that most of my family would be at Aiden's wedding. And although it hurt, we were determined to enjoy our day with those who wanted to be with us. However, as the days went by, we began to receive unexpected responses one after another. Our relatives began to confirm their attendance at the baby shower. First, it was my cousin Lily, who not only reaffirmed that she would come but also offered to bring a special cake for the event. Then my aunts, Savannah and Nora, wrote that they had decided to cancel their attendance at the wedding to be with me. The most shocking thing was when I received a message from my maternal grandmother. She has always been neutral in family conflicts, so I was surprised when she wrote, "Emily, I want you to know that I am on your side. I have seen for years how your parents have favored Aiden, and enough is enough. I will be at your baby shower." I was stunned. My grandmother is the cornerstone of the family, and her decision to attend my event instead of Aiden's wedding completely changed the dynamic. Apparently, many of my relatives began to reconsider their decisions after learning that she would be with me. The day before the baby shower, I received another unexpected call. This time it was from Sophie, Aiden's fiancée. She was crying and apologized to me. "Emily, I did not want this to become so chaotic. Honestly, I was the one who insisted on moving the wedding forward, but I did not think it would cause so much damage. I want you to know that I am sorry." I thanked her for her apology, but I was also honest with her. "Sophie, I appreciate you telling me that, but this is not just about the baby shower. It is about a lifetime of feeling belittled. I hope you understand why I am not willing to give in this time." She sighed, relieved. "I understand. I just wanted to make sure there are no hard feelings between us." Upon hanging up, I felt a little calmer. Sophie seemed genuine, but I knew this would not solve the problem with my parents and Aiden. And I was right. The baby shower started on a wonderful note. The decorations were perfect, the catering arrived on time, and my friends and some family members were already there when Lucas and I arrived at the hall. What excited me most was seeing my grandmother sitting next to Lily and Savannah, smiling and waiting to congratulate me. The atmosphere was warm and full of love, but I could not ignore my phone, which would not stop vibrating. They were messages from my mother and Aiden, first begging and then demanding that I cancel the event. I did not respond. Lucas convinced me to turn off my phone so I could enjoy the moment. As the afternoon progressed, more people began to arrive. Some were relatives who I never thought would prioritize my event over Aiden's wedding. Even aunts and cousins who had always been close to my mother decided to show up. The room quickly filled, and that is when someone mentioned the obvious. Almost all the family guests were there. Not at the wedding. I had no intention of rubbing this in anyone's face, but it seemed that Aiden and my mother had already realized it. Halfway through the event, Lucas took me aside and showed me his phone. My mother had posted a status on Facebook full of rage. "Today should have been the happiest day for our family, but some people only know how to cause division. I am so disappointed in certain people I thought were my support." Although she did not mention my name, it was obvious that she was referring to me. I did not respond. I did not want her drama to ruin our day. But Aiden was more direct. During the thank you speech that Lucas and I gave, I received a message that said, "Enjoy your stupid baby shower. Emily, I hope you feel good knowing that you ruined my wedding. I do not want to hear from you again." Those words hurt me more than I wanted to admit. I knew Aiden was hurt, but blaming me for his poorly planned wedding was too much. Lucas noticed my expression and whispered, "Do not worry about that now. This is our day." When the baby shower ended, my grandmother took my hand and said something I will never forget. "Emily, today I saw something I had not noticed before. You and Lucas have a love that this family needs to learn to value. Do not let anyone take away this happiness." I was moved to tears. That night, as we cleaned up and opened gifts, I decided that I was not going to let Aiden and my parents make me feel guilty. But I also knew that I had to protect my growing family from their toxicity. The days after the baby shower were strangely quiet, at least on the surface. No one from my immediate family tried to contact me directly. However, social media was full of hints and passive-aggressive posts from my mother and brother. My mother kept insisting that the family should be united while throwing veiled criticisms about how some people forget where they come from. On the other hand, Aiden was more direct, insinuating that I had ruined his special day and that I did not deserve the family's support. I did not respond. I clung to the idea that it was not worth stooping to the level of their provocations. But then something unexpected happened. A close cousin, Jacob, who had been at my baby shower, sent me a message with screenshots of a group chat in which my parents, Aiden, and some other relatives were. In that chat, Aiden had written a message that left me frozen. "Emily does not deserve anyone's support. If she wants to act like she is independent, then let her be truly independent. I already talked to mom and dad, and we agree that we should not include her in any future family events. We should focus on the people who really support us. My parents not only did not challenge him, but my mother replied, "It is for the best." She made her decision. Seeing that was like a stab in the heart. It was direct confirmation of something I had always suspected. My place in the family was conditional. The moment I refused to meet their expectations, they turned me into a pariah. Lucas, who was next to me when I read the messages, was furious. "Emily, this is no longer something you can ignore. They are trying to erase your place in the family because you do not kneel before them. It is time to set a definitive boundary." He was right. I knew I could no longer keep acting as if this was just a misunderstanding. My parents and Aiden had made it clear that they did not value our relationship unless I met their terms. I decided to write a direct message to my parents and Aiden. Something that would close this chapter forever. It was not easy, but I knew I had to do it for my own peace of mind. This is what I sent them. "Mom, Dad, Aiden, I have seen the conversations you have had, and now I understand exactly where I stand with you. For years, I have endured being treated as if I were less important than Aiden. But this last situation has been the last straw. I will not continue to tolerate being relegated, insulted, or manipulated to satisfy your desires. If you believe that the only way to be part of this family is to give in to your demands, then you are right about one thing. I do not want to be a part of this. I am going to focus on my own family, on Lucas and our baby, which is the most important thing to me now. I wish you the best. But do not look for me unless you are willing to treat me with respect and as an equal. Until then, I do not need your drama in my life." After sending the message, I blocked them on all social media and on my phone. It was a difficult decision, but I felt immediate relief. Shortly after sending the message, news began to arrive from my cousins and other relatives. Many supported me, saying that my decision was brave and necessary. However, I also learned that my parents and Aiden had begun to tell their own version of the story. According to them, I had abandoned the family and had left them no other choice. I did not care. For the first time in my life, I felt that I was in control. Lucas and I continued preparing for the arrival of our baby, and I decided to focus on the people who really cared about us. A month after cutting off contact with my parents, I received an unexpected message. It was from Sophie, Aiden's wife. She told me that things had not turned out as they had hoped. Their wedding was a disaster. Almost no one attended, and those who did not stay long. Aiden, frustrated and embarrassed, began to blame her for the lack of planning, which strained their relationship from the beginning. "I just wanted to tell you that I am sorry for how they treated you. Emily," Sophie wrote, "now I understand more about how things work in your family, and I cannot say that it is easy to be on this side. Sometimes I think I made a mistake getting involved with them." I thanked her for her words but also made it clear that I was not going to get involved in family drama again. It was a symbolic closure, not only for this situation but for years of repressed feelings. Today, Lucas and I are happier than ever. Our baby was born healthy and surrounded by love. My grandmother, my aunts, and my cousins were by my side every step of the way, showing that true family is not always the one you share by birth but the one you choose. Story 5. My parents forced me to work in their store my whole life. But when I refused to follow their rules for my wedding, now they are trying to ruin it by saying I am ungrateful and selfish. I want to share my story because I feel like I have been living a lie for years. Now that I am about to get married, and everything seems to be falling apart because of my family, I cannot help but reflect on how I got here. I am 28 years old and grew up in a small town in the heart of Ohio. Surrounded by endless cornfields, old rusty silos, and the crushing expectations of my parents. My parents own a small grocery store in town. For them, the store was not just a business, it was the center of our universe. The family legacy. I grew up listening to my mom say things like, "This store is the soul of our family, without it, we would be nothing." Apparently, neither my older brother nor I were really part of that soul. For them, we were tools destined to uphold that legacy. From as far back as I can remember, I spent my afternoons and weekends helping in the store. While other children played outside or went to birthday parties, I was arranging cans on the shelves, labeling products, or cleaning the floor. It was not something my parents asked for, it was something they demanded. There was no room for questions or excuses. This is what it means to be part of a working family. My dad used to say, "For a while, I accepted my reality without question. Living in a small town means you do not have many options or no other ways of life." I grew up thinking it was normal to dedicate your life to maintaining a business that barely survived. But over time, I began to realize that something was not right. When I turned 14, for the first time, I dared to express a dream outside of the store. I remember that in high school, there was a science teacher, Mrs. Martinez, who inspired us all to dream big. She always said, "It does not matter where you come from. What matters is where you want to go." After listening to her, I decided I wanted to study medicine. I wanted to help people, be someone important, escape from that small bubble in which I had grown up. When I told my mom about my dream, her reaction was like a bucket of cold water. "A doctor? And who is going to take care of the store when we cannot? Being a doctor does not pay the bills here. Dear, you and your brother are our only hope to keep this business afloat." I laughed nervously, thinking it was a joke. But it was not. For my parents, my dreams did not matter compared to the needs of the store. That conversation was the beginning of a long internal struggle. I began to realize that I was not a daughter, I was an investment. Someone who had to fulfill a predetermined role in life that they had decided for me. During the following years, any attempt to express my own desires was ignored or ridiculed. When I was 16, I tried to enroll in a summer course at the local university to learn about biology. My dad laughed in my face. "Biology course? And what about the store? We cannot afford to let you go all summer while we work here like donkeys." In the end, I did not go. I spent that summer serving the same old customers, wishing I were someone else, somewhere else. Over time, that routine became oppressive. The store became a jail, and I ate prisoner. My brother, being the oldest, was able to escape by moving to another city after getting married. But they did not let me breathe. My parents insisted that as the only daughter left at home, it was my responsibility to continue with the family business. At 18, when I was about to graduate from high school, I confronted them for the first time. I told them I wanted to go to college out of state. I needed a change, a chance to be myself. My mom's response was devastating. "College? For what? We do not need another person with a useless degree. What we need is someone to stay here and make this store thrive." My parents always used guilt as a weapon to keep me under control. "Everything we do is for you," they said. "This store has given you a roof, food, and education. The least you can do is stay here and help us." Sometimes I felt they were right, that I owed them my time and effort. But other times, when I saw my friends leaving for universities in big cities, I could not help but feel envious. Why could not I do the same? Why was I trapped here, while everyone else moved on with their lives? The years passed, and although I managed to move to a small apartment in the town center, the store remained a constant in my life. My parents expected me to be there every day, even after I got a job as an administrative assistant. They never understood why I needed a job outside the store. For them, it was a betrayal, a way of turning my back on them. The real change in my life began 4 years ago when I met my now fiancé. We worked in the same office, and although at first our interactions were completely professional, little by little we began to get to know each other better. He was the first man who really made me feel worthwhile as a person. That my dreams and desires were important. My fiancé is from a big city with an open and loving family. I remember the first time he took me to meet his parents. They treated me as if I were already part of the family. They asked me about my goals, about what I wanted to achieve in life. Their eyes lit up when I told them I still dreamed of studying medicine someday. It was such a big contrast to what I was used to that I felt overwhelmed. For the first time, someone really believed in me. When my fiancé proposed to me last year, I was in heaven. He knew all about my complicated relationship with my parents and had always been understanding. He had even suggested several times that I set boundaries with them. But until that moment, I had never had the courage. After we told our friends and his family that we were engaged, it was time to tell my parents. Honestly, I did not know what to expect. Deep down, I hoped this news would make them happy, that maybe they would forget their expectations for a moment and share my joy. But as usual, it did not happen that way. The day I went to tell them about the engagement, my mom was behind the counter checking inventory, and my dad was helping a customer. "I have some news," I said with a big smile on my face. "I am engaged. I am getting married." The silence in the store was deafening. My mom stopped writing and looked at me as if I had just announced that I had committed a crime. My dad frowned and said, "And what does that mean for us? What will happen to the store?" That phrase resonated in my head for days. Instead of being happy for me, all they cared about was how my decision would affect their business. I tried to explain to them that marriage did not mean I was going to disappear completely, but that I also wanted to build my own life. It was at that moment that my mom, with her characteristic passive-aggressive tone, said, "We knew this was going to happen sooner or later. Ever since you started dating that boy, you have been more distant. You think you are too good for this family now, right?" I did not know how to respond. The conversation ended in shouting, with my mom saying that I was being selfish, that I was not thinking about what they had sacrificed to raise me. My dad, for his part, just kept repeating, "If you get married, make sure you do not forget where you come from. Because if you abandon this store, you do not have a home to return to. After that argument, things between my parents and me became more tense. My fiancé and I began planning our wedding. But from the beginning, I knew that including my parents would be complicated. My in-laws offered to help cover part of the expenses, something my parents considered an insult. What kind of family accepts money from another for their wedding? My mom said when I mentioned that my fiancé's parents wanted to contribute. Do not you have any shame? We could cover it if you were not so busy distancing yourself from the family. The truth is, they could never have paid for the wedding. But for them to admit it was a humiliation. So instead of being glad that someone was helping us, they decided to use it as another reason to criticize me. My parents began to impose conditions. My mom insisted that the ceremony should be held in the town church, the same one where they got married. It is a family tradition, she said. My dad wanted us to include a special toast during the reception to thank the family for everything they had done for us. When I told them we planned to get married in a small hall in the city where we lived, they exploded. What have we done to you that you humiliate us like this? My mom shouted, you do not even want to get married in your own town. It seems like you are trying to erase your family from your life. From that moment on, everything became a constant struggle. My mom started saying things like, if you do this wedding your way, do not expect us to be there to support you in the future. My dad, although less expressive, made it clear that he saw my wedding as a betrayal. Do not forget who gave you everything you have, he told me one night after closing the store. There were days when I felt that maybe they were right, that maybe I was being selfish. But then I would talk to my fiancé, and I would realize that it was not wrong to want something for myself. This wedding was the first big decision I was making without consulting them. And they could not stand it. The breaking point came a few weeks ago when I told them I did not want to include them in the preparations. Every time I tried to involve them, things ended in fights. My mom called me crying, saying that I was breaking her heart, that she had never imagined she would have such an ungrateful daughter. The truth is, I did imagine having them at my wedding, but not on the terms they insisted on. I wanted them to be there to share my happiness, not to impose their rules. But apparently, that was too much to ask. After weeks of arguments and tense silence, I thought things could not get any worse. But as I have learned with my parents, there is always a new way to disappoint. What began as a battle over how to plan my wedding quickly turned into an attempt at direct sabotage. What hurt me most was not the conflict itself, but realizing that my happiness had never been a priority for them. It all started with rumors. One day, one of my aunts called me to ask why I was not including my parents in the wedding planning. She told me that my mom was crying to the family, saying that I was deliberately excluding her and that I had not even given them a role in the ceremony. This was not true. I had tried to involve them at the beginning, but they themselves had made it impossible to work together. However, instead of explaining this, I just listened and tried to defend myself without adding fuel to the fire. Your mom is devastated, my aunt said in an accusatory tone. I do not understand how you can be so insensitive. All they want is to help you, and you are leaving them out. After that call, I received similar messages from other relatives. Everyone had the same narrative, that I was neglecting my parents, that they just wanted to be part of my life, and that I was rejecting them for no reason. It was clear that my parents had been talking to everyone, distorting the facts to present themselves as the victims. A few days later, I received a call from my mom. Her tone was cold, different from the tears she had used with others. If you are not willing to listen to our suggestions, I do not know if we should go to your wedding, she said. At first, I thought it was just another manipulation tactic, but I soon realized she was being completely serious. This is something important for the whole family, she continued, and if you do not want your wedding to be a reflection of family values, maybe we have nothing to do there. It was a low blow. For days, I could not think of anything else. Part of me was tempted to give in, to make concessions just to avoid losing them completely. But every time I talked to my fiancé, he reminded me why we were doing things our way. It is not their wedding, he would say. It is ours. The real break came when I decided to send the invitations. I had been hesitating for weeks about how to handle the situation with my parents. In the end, I decided to send them the invitation, but I did not include any special role for them in the ceremony. There would be no toasts in their honor or a special seat reserved at the main table. For me, that was the only way to keep the peace. When they received the invitation, my mom called me immediately. This is a joke, she said, her tone alternating between anger and mockery. You are inviting us as if we were just anyone else. After everything we have done for you. I tried to explain to her that the invitation was a way to extend an olive branch, to include them without allowing them to dominate the event. But she did not want to listen. If that is what you think of us, maybe we should not bother going, she said before hanging up. A few days later, I received another unexpected call. This time from my older brother. He had always been the most neutral one in the family. But he seemed to have been influenced by my parents. I heard what is going on. He said, "Mom is devastated. Can't you make this easier for everyone and just give them what they want? It is your wedding, but they are your family. You cannot go on without them." I felt a knot in my stomach. For years, my brother had managed to avoid the toxic dynamics of my parents by moving away. But now he was taking their side. "It is not about them," I replied, trying to stay calm. "It is about me and what I want for this. I cannot keep doing what they want just to keep them happy." "Well," he said curtly, "do not be surprised if they are not there to support you when you really need them." I hung up the call feeling more alone than ever. Finally came the last straw. A close friend of my mom, who was also invited to the wedding, called me to warn me about something she had heard. Apparently, my parents were planning something to make their point during the reception. I did not know exactly what that meant, but according to my friend, my mom had said something like, "If she wants to exclude us from everything, we will make sure everyone knows how ungrateful she is." I could not believe it. It was no longer just about them trying to impose their wishes. Now they were willing to sabotage my wedding, a day that was supposed to be happy for me. After that call, my fiancé and I had a long and difficult conversation. We came to the conclusion that, as much as it hurt, it would probably be better if my parents did not attend the wedding. We decided that the best thing to do would be to hire security for the event and make sure everything went according to plan. I had not told them anything about this decision yet. I did not know how they would react, but I was sure it would be chaos. In the next part, I will tell you how I addressed the situation with them and how things escalated. Making the decision not to include my parents in the wedding was the hardest thing I have ever done in my life. Although I knew it was the right thing for my mental health and to ensure that my big day did not turn into a drama show, I could not ignore the emotional weight that this brought with it. For days, I felt like I had a rock in my chest, and every time my phone rang, I feared it would be one of them with another emotional outburst. I finally gathered the courage to call my mom and explain our decision. I wanted to do it over the phone because I knew that if I did it in person, things would quickly get out of control. When she answered, she sounded calmer than usual, which somehow made me even more nervous. "Hi, Mom," I began. "I want to talk to you about the wedding." She paused and then replied, "Finally, you decided to listen to us." I took a deep breath before continuing. "No, it's not that. I have been thinking a lot about everything that has happened, and I think it will be best if you do not attend the wedding." The silence on the other end of the phone was deafening. For a moment, I thought she had hung up. But then I heard her voice, low and full of contained fury. "What did you say?" I tried to explain calmly, even though my heart was racing. "Mom, this wedding is an important day for me and my fiancé. We have worked very hard to make it special and peaceful. But I feel that you and Dad have made everything more difficult than it should be. I need this day for myself, without conflict." That explanation was all she needed to lose control. "After everything we have done for you, this is how you thank us? By excluding us? So your parents were not good enough for you?" I tried to reason with her, but it was useless. Every word I said seemed to fuel her anger. She started yelling about how I was humiliating them, how I would never find happiness without their blessing, and how I was destroying our family. After a few minutes, my dad took the phone. Although he was less emotional than my mom, his words were even more hurtful. "I hope you know what you're doing," he said in a cold, detached tone. "You are choosing a man over your own blood. When things go wrong, and believe me, they will go wrong, do not expect us to be there to help you." After hanging up that call, I felt devastated. I wanted to be strong, but I could not help but feel guilty. My fiancé found me crying in the living room and hugged me without saying anything at first. Then he looked at me and said, "You are not alone in this. All you are doing is protecting your happiness. It is your right." Those words gave me the strength I needed. We decided that to avoid any unpleasant surprises, it was better to inform our security team about the situation and make sure my parents did not have access to the wedding venue. I also contacted some close relatives I trusted to explain the situation to them. Although not everyone agreed with my decision, some offered their support. A week before the wedding, I received an unexpected text message from an unknown number. It was my mom. She had found another way to contact me after I blocked her on my main phone. The message read, "Your grandmother is sick. We do not know how much time she has left. All she wants is to see you at your wedding. Can you really live with yourself knowing that you will deny her that wish?" I knew it was another manipulation tactic, but it still hurt to read it. My grandmother had always been an important figure in my life, and the idea that she was really sick made me hesitate. However, when I talked to a trusted aunt, she confirmed that my grandmother was perfectly fine, and that this message was just another desperate attempt by my mom to make me feel guilty. Finally, the big day arrived. We had taken all the necessary precautions, security at the entrance, a strict guest list, and a team prepared to handle any unexpected situation. Despite all this, I could not help but feel anxious throughout the morning. I compulsively checked my phone, waiting for news that my parents were trying to do something. When the ceremony began, I felt relieved to see that everything was going according to plan. Being surrounded by my friends, my fiancé, and the people who really supported me was an indescribable feeling. For the first time in a long time, I felt that I was taking control of my life. However, the peace did not last long. During the reception, one of the security guards approached us to inform us that my parents were outside, demanding to be let in. My heart sank. I did not want a spectacle at my wedding, but I could not ignore the situation either. My fiancé and I went out to talk to them, accompanied by the head of security. My parents were there, along with my grandmother, who had clearly been brought along to intensify the emotional pressure. My mom started yelling as soon as she saw me. "Are you really going to slam the door in our faces? We are your family." I took a deep breath and answered calmly. "I asked you not to come because I knew this would happen. This day is not about you, it is about me and my new family. Please respect that." My dad looked at me with a mixture of fury and disappointment. "I hope this is worth it to you, because you have lost your family today." Without saying anything else, they turned and left, but not without making sure that all the guests saw them leave shouting. After my parents left the reception, I felt a mixture of relief and sadness. I knew I had done the right thing by keeping them out of my wedding, but the intensity of the confrontation left me emotionally drained. When I returned to the party, I tried to enjoy the rest of the night with my husband, friends, and the family members who supported me. However, deep down, I knew that chapter with my parents was not completely closed yet. The next morning, my husband and I woke up in the hotel where we stayed after the wedding. Although I tried to focus on the positive, I could not help but open my phone and check social media. As I feared, my parents had wasted no time turning the incident into a public drama. My mom had posted on her profile something like, "When a daughter betrays her family, the pain is unbearable. We did everything for her, but she chose to abandon us on the most important day of her life. May God forgive her." Below her post, there were dozens of comments from relatives and friends from town supporting her, saying things like, "You do not deserve this," and "What an ungrateful daughter." A wave of anger and sadness washed over me as I saw how they manipulated the narrative to paint me as the villain. But what really hurt me were the comments from my grandmother, who wrote, "What a shame, I never thought we would end up like this." That was the last straw. I decided I was not going to let this continue. My husband helped me write a clear and direct response. I posted a message on my social media explaining the truth without going into too much personal detail. My wedding was a special day for me and my husband, and we made decisions that we considered necessary to protect our happiness. I will not tolerate manipulation or malicious comments. This is the last time I will address this issue. The post received mixed responses. Some relatives supported me privately, telling me that they knew what my parents were like and that I had done well to keep my distance. Others were critical, but I decided not to respond. I knew I could not please everyone. The days after the wedding were quiet compared to the drama that had preceded it. My husband and I left for our honeymoon, and for the first time in weeks, I was able to relax and focus on what really mattered, our life together. During that time, I realized that I could not continue allowing my parents to control my emotions. I had to set clear boundaries, and this time, be firm. When we returned, I received an email from my parents. It was short but forceful. "We will not bother you again. If you decide you want to be part of this family again, you know where to find us. But remember, you made this decision." Although their words were like an invitation, I felt it more like an attempt to blame me for everything that happened. I decided not to respond. I knew that any attempt at reconciliation at that time would only reopen wounds that had not yet healed. Instead, I focused on strengthening relationships with the people who really supported me. One of the biggest surprises after the wedding was that my older brother, who had initially sided with my parents, contacted me. He sent me a message saying he wanted to talk to me and apologize for not fully understanding my situation before. We had a long and sincere conversation. He confessed that although he had tried to remain neutral, he had felt pressure from my parents to take their side. "I have always known how they are," he said, "but it's easier to go along with them than to confront them. Now I see that it was not fair to you." Although his apology did not erase everything that had happened, it meant a lot to me. It was a reminder that although my parents were still a problem, there were still people in my family willing to support my happiness. In the following months, I made a conscious effort to focus on my new life. My husband and I bought a small house on the outskirts of town and began planning our future. I finally decided to pursue my dream of studying medicine, enrolling in classes while working during the day. For For the first time, I felt that I had total control of my life. Although cutting off contact with my parents was painful, I realized that it was necessary for my well-being. I learned that sometimes, even the people who should love you unconditionally can be a source of toxicity. And it is okay to prioritize your own happiness. A few weeks ago, I received an unexpected letter from my grandmother. It was short, but instead of criticism or reproaches, it contained something completely different, an apology. She told me that she had been unfair to me, that she had been manipulated by my parents' words, and that she regretted not having supported me when I needed it most.